Hi, everyone. I'm Shay Connolly for GovExec, and I'm excited to introduce you to Streamlining Security, Operations, and Compliance, Automation Strategies for Federal Agencies, sponsored by ThunderCat Technology and Tynes. Federal agencies today must balance efficiency, security, and compliance, often with limited resources. Workflow automation and orchestration offer a path forward, helping teams reduce manual workloads, improve cybersecurity response, and streamline complex processes. Today, we'll explore practical strategies for agencies to harness automation to meet their goals. To help me explore this topic, I'd like to welcome Dave Hinchman, Director of Information Technology and Cybersecurity at the Government Accountability Office, Navid Vlotska, Principal Solutions Engineer of Federal at Tynes, and Darren Presbitero, Cybersecurity Specialist at ThunderCat Technology. We appreciate your time today. Without further ado, let's dive in. So let's get started by having each of you introduce yourselves and share a bit about your experience with automation. And Dave, let's start with you.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Great to be here today. Thanks for having me. As Shay said, my name is Dave Hinchman. I'm a Director of IT and Cybersecurity at the U.S. Government Accountability Office. For those who don't know, we are an independent legislative branch agency that audits other federal agencies on the executive branch side. And my portfolio is critical infrastructure, cybersecurity, cloud computing, as well as a couple of other things such as cyber workforce and some business systems modernization. But in our work looking at cloud security, we increasingly run across things like what agencies are doing to automate their operational efficiencies and their security, and how to better handle the ever-present and ever-growing threat that's out there.
Great, thank you. And Navid, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Nice to meet everybody. Navid Wolotska. I'm the Principal Solutions Engineer here for Federal at Tynes. A little bit about myself. I've been working in the cyber industry for about 17 years now. I have a lot of experience in the federal space, holding positions such as Deputy CISO at a civilian agency, as well as SOC manager roles, security engineering roles, and lately, over the last 5 or 6 years, have gotten into the automation and orchestration realm, where I worked at Splunk for 3 years as a SOAR solutions architect, and now I'm at Tynes here, helping drive our federal customers to get more efficiencies out of their source solutions.
Great, thanks for being here. And Darren, how about you?
Hi, everyone. Darren Presbitero. I have around 25 years of industry experience, all of them focused on the federal market. Background is engineering, networking, cybersecurity, and I also do a ton of app development, including automation scripting. So I've been involved in the automation space probably since the late 90s. My whole goal in life is to automate myself out of a job if I can do that. So it's a pleasure to be here. I currently hold a position at ThunderCat Technology as a cyber and analytics advisor.
Thank you. So to kind of set the scene here, Dave, can you give us an overview of how federal agencies are currently leveraging automation to improve both operational efficiency and also security?
Sure. As I mentioned, I deal with a lot of cloud growth, and agencies are increasingly moving into the cloud. Along with that, they're opening themselves to increasing threat surface, and agencies are really needing to think differently about how to respond to that. It's easier for bad actors to get the technology to attack you. You have more exposure as we move government increasingly online. And so along with that, AI, there's obviously huge growth in that. And I think, last year, the federal government reported about over 1,700 use cases, which was a 2.5 times growth over year 2023. And so that's increasingly a part of this. If you go into the use case repository in GitHub and you scroll down the different instances, you'll see a whole lot of references to security. And I think agencies are increasingly looking at AI as an enabling tool to help them better respond to these ever increasing and ever present threats. With security operations automation, they look at how, the proactive threat identification, proactive incident response, and then also how to reduce the risk if there is a breach, because you have faster response times, and really using automation as a tool to help your security staff be more efficient, be more responsive, while also better protecting your enterprise.
Great. And so as these agencies are sort of increasingly looking into AI and automation, Navid and Darren, can you tell me a little bit about, from a technology perspective, what are some of the biggest barriers to moving further on this journey, and how can they be overcome? Darren, do you want to start?
Sure. I think there's a couple of barriers that that really surface, at least up front, when you start looking at automating, whether it's security operations tasks or even automating things like onboarding of technologies and services, right, for customers, especially if you're trying to roll out self-service type environments. The first one that comes to mind is really a cultural shift. And what that means is we find that there's a lot of pushback whenever you start talking about automation. And I think in today's environment, it's a bit easier, but I started this automation journey and talking about robotics process automation and security orchestration back in, probably 2017. And there was just a ton of friction with folks when we would have these conversations. So I think first and foremost, broaching the topic in a way in which the people in the organization, the stakeholders understand that this is not something that will replace your jobs per se, but will assist you in your current roles. And I think as we start to chip away at some of the workflows and tasks that can be automated, we'll start to alleviate some of that sort of, fingers on keyboard activities and some of that mundane tasks that will free people up to do other more knowledge-based tasks. Now, with the advent of AI and ML and LLMs, that's just another thing that's going to apply friction when we start talking about, freeing people up to do more knowledge-based work. But that's another topic. The second part that I see, other than the human cultural friction piece, is interoperability and open standards between the disparate tools and environments in which you wish to automate these workflows in. Navid, I'll kick it over to you for your thoughts.
No, I think, Darren, you bring up a really good point when you're talking about the introduction of AI, and one of the barriers being that agencies or people working within agencies don't want to be replaced by source solutions, right? And I don't think that's the case whatsoever. I know when automation first came about, I don't know, 8 or so years ago, with some of our more legacy source solutions, that was always a concern. But I think with the advent of AI now, and incorporating AI into existing playbooks or automation workflows that agencies have already developed, using solutions like Tines, for example, you can really further enhance an analyst's or an engineer's or an operator's role within the platform, because you now have almost call it an AI co-pilot, but it's not really a co-pilot. You also almost have a chat GPT type interface that you can interact with, not only asking the AI industry standards or questions like, how do I respond to this incident, but also incorporating your own agency data in a enclosed and secure environment, and giving the AI that context, right? Giving the AI the context of the assets that you have deployed in your environment, the vulnerabilities that you have on those assets, right? And being able to, on the fly, have an interface to ask the right questions of, hey, this host, what vulnerabilities or what critical vulnerabilities do I need to be worried about? And who do I need to contact to get those vulnerabilities resolved? So I think, it being a barrier and a barrier to entry at having AI systems in federal agencies, but on the flip side, that can really enhance any analyst workflow and their daily jobs and operations. Now, on the barriers, I see really 3 types of barriers of entry to automation products within the federal space. I think we were all around 10 years ago or so when the advent of SIM was around, and it was everybody was getting a SIM solution. They wanted to integrate with, get logs from all these other systems within the agency environment. I think SOAR is still in that realm where there's political barriers to try to get API accesses to certain systems, right? Especially with zero trust, where now you're not only operating within the SOC, but you're operating within the entire agency and try to automate processes across the entire agency. So I think that's a big one, especially with M2209 implementing zero trust mandate. But the second one is, everybody has their own disparate processes and their own systems where they're automating their own workflows. And with zero trust, again, you want to centralize them into a policy decision point where possible or necessary or feasible. And that might cause some heartache because you're now taking processes away from teams and centralizing them into some other systems. Doesn't have to be that way, right? There's other solutions out there like Tines that make automation really easy. And it takes away the black box mentality where I don't know what that automation system's doing. Only certain engineers have access to it. And there are very highly skilled engineers and nobody else can do any of those automation processes. I think we're way past that point now where automation can be easy for everyone within the agency, from security teams to IT teams and even HR and other mission-driven teams within the agencies.
Well, making automation easier, I'm sure, is music to the ears of a lot of people listening here. And so, of course, as agencies are working towards that and navigating these various human and technology challenges, compliance is always a major concern. Dave, can you share an example of perhaps an automation initiative that significantly enhanced compliance or threat response?
Absolutely. And I'm excited about this question because ordinarily I can't talk about the agencies that we're auditing. They don't want to hear me talking about what's going well with them, what's not. But in this particular case, GAO right now is on its own automated journey. And while I'm not personally involved in that, our CIO and her shop are running this. She has talked about it and there's been some interviews, so I know I'm in pretty safe territory talking about this. And I think, if you think about GAO, we are a knowledge and data-based organization. We have 13 functional mission teams. At any point in time, we have hundreds of audits going on across the federal government, and that generates massive amounts of data that's both sent to us by the agencies we're auditing, as well as being processed internally, large amounts of email, heavy analysis work. We have an innovation lab where we work on audit technologies. And so one of the things that we've been very focused on is how to implement what we call intelligent automation. And so this is looking at proactive cybersecurity, tools that can track anomalies that are spotted in the network, as well as blocking malicious attacks, which, as we all know, every federal agency deals with in the scale of tens of thousands at least every day. And so when you talk to our CIO about this, she notes that it's important to recognize for our organization that we are working to mature what we have. We had some data infrastructure. We're working to update that. We're moving into more of a cloud environment. And so at the same time, it's important to understand what your exposure means. And I mentioned this, as part of my modernization work, agencies increasingly expose themselves to greater risk when you're getting rid of legacy IT because new technology tends to be more online and more exposed that way. And so, one of the things that we're looking to do within GAO is to bring in capabilities and tools that help sort of sort malicious from what might be just an employee mistake attempting to access the wrong system because they clicked the wrong link on our list of internal web pages. But at the same time, this is letting us manage thousands of devices and users, which is both in our headquarters in DC as well as our field office locations around the country, while also maintaining the important compliance with legislative mandates that we get from Congress, as well as our own executive C-suite cyber mandates that we put into place to ensure that we're keeping our cybersecurity controls as up to date as possible and relying on technology that's as modern and updated as possible.
Great, thank you. So Navid, as Dave kind of just highlighted, security teams are really facing ever increasing workloads and exposure, even while threats become more sophisticated. So how can automation help agencies stay ahead of these threats while also reducing manual burdens?
Yeah, I think, and I think federal agencies have kind of learned this from experience. Automation needs to be easy, right? It needs to you need to be able to build automation workflows within minutes, right? Especially when you're dealing with ongoing threats, ongoing activities within your agency where teams are spread thin, right? You might be doing incident response, but at the same time also building some kind of automation workflow that does hunting for IOCs, right, that you're responding to, right, in near real time. So I think to be really successful, to respond to threats in an automatic way, almost, you really need to have an automation platform that's really easy to use, something that has very low barriers of entry into your environment, right? An automation platform that you can instantly spin up a API query to a solution that you might not have integrated with before, just to pull some piece of information that you need to respond, right? And also having AI, right, right next to you and helping you respond to that incident, right? I think being a responder myself, I think one of the things that usually held up a lot of processes in the past has been documentation, right? Um, I think this is really where AI can help us a lot, and help us streamline some of these processes because if you're a SOC operator, right, and you're working through events and alerts all day long, you don't have a lot of time to document your processes, right? I think one of the really cool features at Tines that I recently got exposed to is our AI workbench, where you can actually just tell the AI agent with the context of your agency data, hey, document this incident in this case for me so I can access it later, right? That just saved the incident responder at least 5 to 10 minutes of time. And not only did it do that, it also was able to document all of the critical artifacts, indicators, and anything else that occurred during that incident, right? And now you're not only introducing enhanced documentation, but also standardizing your processes too, right? You have now consistent documentation from auditability and a compliance standpoint and perspective. And all of that documentation might be fed up to a higher level CSIRT within your agency or CSOC or even the US CERT, right, for additional action.
And I'll double click on what Naveed just mentioned and maybe go a little deeper. I've literally sat in these SOCs with these analysts and watched their workflow. One of the companies that I was with in the past was like sort of like the first version SOAR company, and so I did a lot of analysis and discovery work with these SOC analysts, and it's a brutal job. Let's just start off with that. And these folks spend anywhere between 15 and 20 minutes, sometimes even longer, just attempting to understand every alert that comes into their dashboard or every email that comes in. And when we're talking about the volume of these emails and alerts, we're talking about millions and millions of alerts that are bombarding these analysts. And we don't have enough human capital to throw at the problem anymore. So 15 to 20 minutes just to understand what this noise is. And then another 15 to 20 minutes to do correlation and enrichment of those alerts, or to understand how it relates to maybe other things that are in your environment. So then you'll know how to respond to this event, or mark it as a false positive. So we're talking about 30 minutes per incident or per alert coming in, and then potentially turning that into some kind of action. The way that I see technologies such as Tines address this problem is by helping these folks minimize that 30-minute window down to 30 seconds. And then even providing multiple courses of action or COAs in which the analysts, as we put the human in the loop, can then make an informed decision based off of the information around enriching and correlating with other types of data sets. One of the really cool pieces to all of this is the tie-in with orchestration automation tools like Tines and threat intelligence platforms. So not only is the analyst making a decision based off of the events that are seen in their local environment, but they're also able to view correlating events and enriched information that's coming from industry or from open source feeds around the threat intelligence space. So the nice thing about Tynes is that they've made it very simple with pre-built integrations to be able to build these playbooks rapidly and quickly with a minimum amount of knowledge and resources to make this happen.
And if you don't mind, I'm going to add one last piece to that and kind of tie in what Mr. Henchman said as well here is, agencies are dealing with thousands and thousands of assets, right? Assets that are constantly online or laptops or workstations going on and offline, right, on a consistent basis and operating in the wild. So I think one of the things that, Darren also said that was really important is standardizing your processes, right? And really providing the right information at the right time to the analyst for them to make an informed decision and kind of move on to the next alert or the next investigation. And really the way we would do that is integrate with your asset management tools, right? Have pre-built templates or pre-built playbooks and pre-built integrations with those types of asset management tools. So when an alert triggers and you see an IP address, right, that you've never seen before in your agency, maybe, right, or you don't know what that host is, we have automatic playbooks that go and actually enrich that IP address with the asset. So right off the bat, the analyst has the IP address, the host, the customer information, and maybe even the ISSO or operating official who's responsible for that system. So that already saves the analyst 5 to 10 minutes so they don't have to go searching for who the asset owner is and what application is running on that asset before they effectively respond to it. And again, I think what we mentioned here is, Tynes, we've got almost over 1,000 pre-built story libraries or what we call playbooks that really analysts can use to jumpstart their automation processes and start building those processes within their environment where they don't have to spend a week or so building that stuff from scratch.
Yeah, this kind of time savings, Darren, you and Navid are talking about is huge, especially multiplied many times over. But what about when it comes to balancing this efficient, fast automation with maintaining oversight and control in critical processes? What strategies have you seen that seem to work best?
Yeah, on my side, I mean, I think, it involves the governance aspect and the policing or policy pieces to all of this, right? And so what you're going to end up doing is bringing together multiple different parts of the organization, and Navid hit on this, right? Because what we're seeing is that orchestration automation really touches and has implications across the enterprise. So I think, if we're talking about compliance or we're talking about continuous monitoring for risk scoring or for threat response, I think the way that I usually approach this is by working with the individual folks, the boots on the ground, the middle level managers. And then, a lot of times what you'll find is that the current policy or procedure for handling something or doing something isn't exactly what the folks at the bottom tiers are doing. And so there's some reconciliation that has to happen. And usually that involves many people in the same room, talking it over, probably a lot of whiteboard space so you can draw out the process. Mm-hmm. And then that reconciliation process then ensues so that you can then all come to an agreement on what the governance and policing aspect of the individual workflows and cases would look like. Navi, Dave, I'd love to hear your take on this.
Crawl, walk, run methodology implementation, and it's starting with low-lying processes that are easy to automate and that don't have a huge impact on other systems within the agency, right? And this is slowly introducing automation within the agency, right? Where, you're not right off the bat automatically containing machines and hosts and things like that, right? Because I think a lot can go wrong with that. I think it's critical that agencies adopt that methodology, right? I think automation can be very exciting, especially exciting when you use a product like Tines, where it makes it really easy to automate and really fun in some circumstances. You still need to stick to that crawl, walk, run methodology, though. And Darren hit the nail on the head with that, with the use case workshops, right? Let's start small. Let's meet in small teams. Let's build out the use cases we want to automate. Let's wireframe them out and then slowly build them, right? Once we build a few of these automation use cases, we can start getting to the walk phase, right? Where we know these processes work in our environment. There haven't been any issues. We're starting to see the value. Let's start introducing some other teams, maybe, or maybe some slight automated remediation with human intervention, right? And then you go into the run methodology, where you now have multiple teams, not just within the SOC, but maybe the IT team, maybe the HR team, right? For user offboarding type use cases, they're all involved in the platform now. And you've got playbook repositories, you've got change control management around all of that. Now the agency has fully adopted automation, right? And maybe you're even automating zero trust processes at this point, because you've done that legwork. You've talked to other teams about how automation can help them. And I think a lot of this goes to automation, what I like to call automation burn-in, right? We're not just going to build a playbook or a workflow and just continually add to it until something goes wrong, right? It's iterative development, iterative building, where you build a certain segment of a workflow, you let that burn in for however long you need, a week or 2 weeks. And while you're doing that, you can build other workflows, right? But at least you know that there's nothing wrong with that workflow that you've built, right? And you're not turning people off automation because, let's say, you accidentally quarantine something, right? And maybe a VIP's host or server or something like that. You now don't have to fight that stigma around automation, that it's doing things that the agency doesn't understand, or it's causing availability issues on servers or hosts, right? So I think the key point here is, how do you balance automation while maintaining oversight in critical processes? It's the crawl, walk, run methodology. It's how you implement. It's doing automation burn-in and making sure you are talking to the right stakeholders within the agency to help alleviate any heartburn around automation. Dave, any insight on that?
Yeah, I would just offer super quick, because the points you guys have made have done such a great job covering this. But right, as an auditor, I come at this almost the back end. There are federal compliance requirements that agencies have to meet. And so we look at that. And as we've talked to folks and looking out over the past 20 years of IT development, the big bang approach, where you do some massive upgrade, massive development, and drop it on the organization, more often than times than not, will fail. And so I think the crawl, walk, run approach is great. Start small, find something that doesn't have a big impact on the organization, get it in place, get the kinks out, make sure it's working, then slowly, incrementally, very much in an agile development sort of way, roll this out throughout the organization. Because there are things like zero trust and the push to that. There are other compliance requirements and FIPS. And so you always want to make sure you're meeting that, while you're also doing it in a way that's going to drive adoption in an organization, as well as set yourself up for success as you head out on that journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dave, of course, this automation we've been discussing has enormous potential, but as agencies work to actually integrate it, how do they make sure they keep their tools adaptable to both future threats, but also regulatory changes?
So my answer to this is this has nothing to do with the actual technology. This has to do with what I call planning and partnering. And I think this is something that we've seen in the growth of cloud, that before you even talk to a vendor as a federal agency, you need to understand what it is you want. Where are you trying to get? What kind of changes are this going to bring in? We've talked about the impact of people and being scared that they're going to lose their jobs. And no, these should be tools that help people do their jobs better, but they are going to do their jobs differently. And I think that's important to recognize. We've talked about the overwhelming volume of alert. of alerts. If you put a robust system in place, you're going to start learning a whole lot more about who's trying to get into your house than you probably wanted to know. But you need to be able to handle that. And we talked about the time involved in processing these different instances. So you want to make sure you understand there's going to be new workflows that your folks are going to have to learn and understand. And I think as well as making sure you have staff that are trained up for this. And so that's the planning part. And that means with that knowledge, sitting down with vendors, making sure that you are really going to develop partnerships with these industry folks. Make sure that they understand what it is you want, but I think also make sure you understand what they're offering and that these are all going to work together. Because the worst thing that can happen is you get into a relationship and suddenly the vendor can't provide what it is you want because that's just not part of their service offering. And now you've got this thing where are you just going to not have this thing you want, or what is it? So make sure you're really sitting down and understanding all this. And the other part from the audience perspective I'd offer is GAO has a cybersecurity program audit guide. And so sit down with that, look through the things that we would look at if we were coming in to audit your cybersecurity program, and use these sort of talking points as questions like, hey, are we doing this? If an auditor asks me this, how are we going to answer that? And that has to do a lot with the growth, right? You need to be able to adapt to threats down the road. You need to be able to adapt to regulatory changes. And so I think those are just sort of the planning and partnering part, as well as looking at different audit guides, which just offers a different perspective on what changes you've made and how you're running your program.
Hey, Dave, I really appreciate what you just said. And if I could sum it up, I kind of used what my dad used to always tell me, measure twice, cut once, right? So, there's no substitute for great planning. So, fortunately, our agencies and the folks that, are doing the great work there have, they have a lot of opportunity to conduct market research studies and really take a look at what industry is doing, right? One thing I would urge is, there's a lot of commercial large organizations that have some similar problems and have addressed those problems similarly to what agencies are looking for. So, don't be afraid to reach out to, the Facebooks of the world, the Google of the world, and see how they're running their SOC or running their compliance program. The other thing that I think you hit on, Dave, and I want to make sure that this is emphasized, is the training aspect, right? The ability to rapidly onboard folks that had maybe skills that are, automation and AI ML is starting to sort of take over, and then moving them into new roles. I kind of, as an example, think about, when folks used to plow fields manually, right? And then along comes the John Deere tractors, and, all we're doing is we're going to help folks, should they want that assistance to become John Deere tractor, repair folks, right? Like, learn the hydraulic systems, right? No need to understand how to put together these manual processes anymore, because that'll get taken care of. And what that'll allow our folks to do is really level up. So appreciate that comment, Dave.
No, yeah, and just to tag on to what Darren said a little bit and even bridge the gap with Dave, what he said is, I think I'm going to go back to this. I think automation just needs to be easy. It needs to be auditable, and we need to hold it accountable, right? And I think, we've had past stigma. It depends on the agency that you've talked to, right? Some have been really successful with leveraging traditional SOAR products and automation products. Some have been struggling, right? And I think what's really important here is picking the right automation solution for the skill sets that you have within that agency, right? For the engineers that are going to be deploying those workflows, or even the users that are going to be using that platform on a daily basis. I've seen teams, be really wowed by vendors and just other technologies of, hey, I want this really cool product in here, but they're not really taking a look at the level of effort of implementation. They're not taking a look at the skill sets that are really needed to fully leverage that platform. Thankfully, Tines can really be used by anybody, right? You know, I'm a pretty seasoned automation engineer, so getting into the product was pretty easy for me. You know, I was able to drag and drop API web calls. I was able to easily build triggers or if-then statements, right, within the product itself without knowing code, even though I do know it, right? It just made it that much easier and made it that much faster. So and I can't imagine for somebody who doesn't have as much experience how easy it would be to use a platform like that to automate really quickly. So I think, again, I mean, everybody talks about ease of use and getting in and using these platforms fairly quickly. Tines is truly one of those platforms that really enables users to not only build what they are dealing with today via solving it via automation, but also looking forward and getting excited about automation and seeing what other use cases not only can they build within their team, but also bridge the gap between security, IT, HR, and application development teams, right? And really understanding looking at right the unicorn and being like, hey, that's where we want to get to, and having a tool that allows you to actually do that and get to that next level that you're looking to achieve.
Yeah, Navid, going off of that and looking forward, you know, we've been hearing a lot of exciting things about current developments and opportunities, but I'd love to hear a little bit more in the future. What are some emerging automation tools or strategies that you are excited about right now?
I think we've talked about it several times now, and that's AI, right? And I think in the commercial world, AI adoption has really accelerated, right? There's a lot of compliance teams being built around AI, making sure we're governing it the right way. Um, I haven't seen it so much in the federal side quite yet, but it's there, right? I think we've got agencies researching AI, seeing how they can use it within the agencies. And I think that's really the next step here in our automation journey is not just manually building automation workflows, but enhancing them with AI, right? And using an agency approved AI. I think that's the beauty of Tines is we're not only a SaaS, we not only have a SaaS solution, but we have a full on-prem solution, which has pretty much feature parity with our SaaS solution, right? And with that comes bring your own AI functionalities or features, right? You're no longer locked into a certain AI provider that an agency might be using, but you can bring your own AI provider to the platform with your own approved models, your own approved LLMs, and leverage the power of automation and context, your own agency context that stays within your Tines tenant, but you still get the power of AI and guidance that it can actually provide. So I think really that's the future, integrating automation workflows, integrating analyst workflows, um, and basically building that trifecta where you have AI, you have your integrations, and you have your playbooks. And really seeing the power of all three of those combined into one type of per se chat interface, I think that's the next level that we're trying to achieve and we can get to.
Hey, Navid, I want to add something on as well. And this is, you know, really something that is a differentiator of your product, is the ability to create rapid front-end web UI portals for users. So, you know, a lot of, I think what we talked about was sort of the back-end processing and workflow, but, you know, lest we not forget that, you know, in the art of simplifying things, having the ability to rapidly spin up a web page with discrete inputs or you know, buttons and such, that enables the folks that are leveraging Tines to be able to spin up something rapidly and even create their own front end to whatever chatbot they want, whatever LLM or whatever process, essentially whatever playbook you'd like to run in the background. So being able to generate that UI UX in a very quick manner, I think is something that I'm personally seeing a lot of folks adopt using your tool. So I just wanted to make sure that
Yeah, I
that was
think that's arguably one of our most flagship features that no other SOAR automation product out there provides customers in that streamlined manner. And I think One of the cool things we're able to do too, Darren, like you mentioned, is use one of those pages, but then have an AI action run in the back end. So for example, if you've got a complicated network diagram that you need explaining to, or that let's say you just onboarded a brand new analyst and he needs to know what the architecture of your network is, right? Having the ability to spin up a web page within seconds and uploading a image and then having AI process that image and actually tell you what's going on in that image is game changer, right? We now took a process that probably took an hour maybe with multiple resources to explain to a user what is going on in a network diagram, and we did that within seconds, right? So I think really that's the future, right? That's really what we're trying to get to. And I can't wait to see what else we put out this year from a feature perspective, because I think we're only going up from here.
So Darren, we know there's a lot of variation in where agencies are on their automation journeys, but if you have someone who's just kind of starting out, what advice do you give them for successful implementation?
Yeah, I'd say, and I think Navid might have mentioned this earlier, is start small. Look at, and some organizations aren't doing this, many are though, but look at your metrics, your performance indicators around, and it's not just for SOC, it's for everything else. Look at how much time and energy and effort it's taking for your people to do repetitive tasks. Start there and then take a look at, and then at that point, you've got something that is pretty defined, right, as far as a workflow. Then look at the tools that make up that workflow, that task, and see if those tools have APIs. And that's a big piece we didn't talk much about on this session, but APIs are really the enabler, right? They are the lingua franca of the technologies in order to have everything kind of speak together, and in time sort of sits in the middle as this connectivity tissue, if you will. But understanding the workflows that will produce the high amount of value for your organization, even if it's just one or two workflows. And then secondly, integrating or at least mapping out those tools that workflow would need to interact with in order to be successful is the second piece. And then don't be afraid to keep the human in the loop, right? And I think when people hear automation, they feel like they have to eat the whole thing all at once, where they have to get to a point where the automation tool is even taking action. But I would argue that that's probably the last thing that a lot of our customers are doing, right? They usually are keeping that human in the loop, and it gives the stakeholders or the folks that are doing the work today a sense of control. And I think that's very empowering for people to feel like they still have control over that process. So that's sort of where I would start the journey. And then lots of training, right? Get them comfortable with the tools that they're looking at. And maybe one last thing I would focus on is try to understand what they've automated already, because when we go into these environments, there's usually one, maybe two folks that are, we call them the script kiddies, that have already written a whole bunch of Python scripts or just basic non-UI based scripts that are doing some of this automation. So the ability to ingest those scripts or convert those scripts into native playbooks, I think, is an opportunity to get started in this space.
Great, thank you. So this has been a great discussion, and we are sadly almost at the end of our time. But as a final question, I would love to hear from each of you a little bit about what lessons you've learned from implementing automation, or really just any final thoughts you'd like to leave us with today. So Dave, let's start with you.
Sure. No implementation myself. We've certainly talked to a lot of organizations that are headed down this journey. And, it comes back to the point I made earlier about planning and partnering and making sure you really thought out from a business perspective what it is you're trying to do and how you're going to do it. And I think the other part that I had not mentioned earlier is make sure you have a really loud vocal executive sponsor. I think that's going to go a long way towards driving adoption with your organization and helping people really embrace the change that will come with this move into an increasingly automated environment.
Great. Navid, do you want to share any final thoughts with us?
Sure. I think we've hit on a lot of these points throughout this whole webinar, but I'm going to go back to them because I think they're just really important. I've implemented automation orchestration platforms for about 5 to 6 years now, and I think these 3 points here are the tried and true to really be successful, right? One, the crawl, walk, run methodology that we've already discussed and went through, right? Iterating through that model or methodology and making sure you're taking iterative steps and not trying to eat the whole elephant as once, as Darren said, right? We're going to take bite-sized pieces and then we'll eventually get there, right? The second really is make sure you're picking the right platform for your for whoever is going to be automating and utilizing that product, right? And making sure, like also Darren said, that you have the right integrations in that platform, right? Thankfully, like Tynes, I think we've already mentioned multiple times on this call, we can integrate with anything, right? With our curl to tines capabilities, where you can take a copy and paste the curl command and drop it right into the interface and build the integration right then and there, or leverage our 430 plus integrations already existing out there, right? So again, having a platform that your analysts can use that matches your skill sets, but also is able to integrate with not only your security tools in your environment, but your entire ecosystem, right? This goes back to the zero trust thing, right? The zero trust mandate. You can use automation platforms to be your policy decision points, right? So making sure you're picking the right platform that can integrate with a vast amount of tools in your environment, so it doesn't become shelfware. And then the last piece here is automate the low-hanging fruit, right? Don't go after those big monolithic processes that you execute maybe once or twice a month, because you're not going to see ROI on that as fast as automating little pieces, right? The smaller pieces you automate, the bigger your return on investment, because those are processes that execute every single day, multiple times a day. And that's how you start saving time.
Navid. And Darren, any final thoughts from you to wrap us up here?
Yeah, wow. Between Navid and Dave, I don't know what else I could add. I guess to sum it up, just remember that, you know, when we embark on this automation journey, it's really 80% people, culture, and 20% technology tools. So I think if you take that approach and you come into it from a more consultative angle, a more education angle, you know, ensure that the folks continue to feel like the people in the trenches continue to feel like they are in control, and you know, allow them to gain confidence, give them the training they need, put together a plan that that involves that training and involves all of the different stakeholders, really focusing on the people and culture side more than anything else. I think you can see some success when you do it that way.
Great, thanks, Darren. So that brings us to the end of our conversation today. Dave, Navid, and Darren, thank you so much for your time and expertise. And to our audience, thank you for tuning in. Today's program will be available for on-demand viewing, so you can come back and rewatch or share with your colleagues who might have missed it. For GovExec, I'm Shay Connolly. Thanks for stopping by.